Day 1. The sun was starting to set, dripping gold over the neighborhood of Compton as the last school bus rumbled down the streets. Inside, Marcus and Maya, the last kids on the field trip, were engrossed in a conversation with Jamal, their lifelong friend and member of their trio. "Yo, imagine if we lived back in the day, like ancient times," Marcus said, his dark eyes reflecting the remnants of the afternoon light. He was holding an imaginary sword, swinging it in the air. "I'd be the eyeless knight bro, slice and dice a motherfucker. I would have been like a damn samurai." Maya rolled her eyes. "In your dreams, bro. You'd probably cut your own damn dick off." But Jamal was nodding, a grin stretching across his face. Nah. Marcus got a point. "I'd be a samurai too, dem boys were lethal. Quick, silent, deadly, and shit." "Deadly?" Maya scoffed, leaning back in the seat. "Y'all can't even catch a football without tripping on your own feet." "But you know what? I'd be a Viking chick though, one of them shield maidens. Sailing seas, exploring and sightseeing, ain't no one messin' with no shield maiden." Their laughter echoed through the empty bus as the bus driver, Mr. Jenkins, watched them through the rearview mirror. He didn't say anything, just a stoic expression and taciturn nature. The usual Mr. Jenkins, they were starting to roll through familiar areas. Finally, the bus pulled up to their stop. The trio thanked Mr. Jenkins and hopped off into the quiet street. The usual ruckus of Compton was eerily absent. Where Smitty usually stood, selling his weak-ass dime bags. It was empty, calm. "Damn, it's quiet. A little too quiet, ain't it?" Marcus commented, his voice low and uncertain. "Yeah, where the fiends at?" Jamal looked around, his brow furrowing. "And where's the music?" "Ain't no Compton without no music. This shit kinda fucked up, let's get to the crib." Maya nodded, unease creeping into her voice. "And where are the cars?" "This ain't right. Come on Jamal with yo slow ass. Our folks are out this weekend, remember?" Marcus reminded them, a hint of concern in his voice. "We promised we wouldn't throw a party, but it feels like we should do a little celebration of our own." The house stood stark and solitary against the encroaching night, their little slice of the neighborhood. Marcus, Maya, and Jamal approached with a shared sense of unease, their footsteps echoing ominously. Still no signs of life. It dawned on Jamal that they haven't seen another person since the bus driver. Gooseflesh pimpled on his neck as he felt a shiver go down his spine. "See?" Marcus pointed to the empty driveway. "Told you. They're out for the weekend." Maya nodded, her gaze sweeping over the darkened house. "It's so quiet." The three of them entered, the door creaking open to reveal an empty, dark house. As Maya was slowly sliding her backpack from her back, Marcus, with a mischievous grin, slapped it out of her hands and bolted. Giggling, she gave chase, their footsteps thundering through the house. Marcus dashed to the hall, passing the kitchen and through the turnaround. She was hot on his heels, and once he made it back to the entrance he bolted up the stairs and into his room, slamming the door shut just as Maya reached the top. "Too slow, sis." His voice echoed from behind the door, the teasing lilt returning some semblance of normalcy. Behind her, Jamal headed into the kitchen, as familiar with the layout of the house as his own. He had grown up here, in this house, with Marcus and Maya. He knew the rhythms, the routines, and most of all where they kept the shit for sandwiches. With a practiced ease, he swung open the fridge, scanning its contents. It was medium-stocked, enough for a decent meal. He began to assemble a sandwich, the familiar process a comforting ritual. From upstairs, the muffled sound of Maya's voice seeped through, swearing and laughing as she argued with Marcus through his door. Jamal shook his head, a smile tugging at his lips. Despite the odd silence of the neighborhood and the unsettling quiet of the house, some things never changed. He thought to himself. An hour later they were all seated in the living room. Marcus on the couch breaking down some fine herb he had stashed. Maya cleaned the blunt's innards and cleaned the leaf. Jamal sat in Marcus Sr.'s lazy boy, a sacrilege on normal days. He felt as if Marcus's dad felt the moment his ass cheeks hit the leather. Friday played in the background. Smokey was badgering Creek to cave and hit his bud. "Man, them niggas had shitty bud back then," Jamal said from his tan leather throne. "That was some regos or some shit. If that nigga hit that shit Marcus rolling up, he'd be comatose." Maya burst into uncontrollable laughter, and Jamal felt satisfied with his quip. The finishing touches were done and the 3-gram blunt released its pungent smell into the air. Soon the living room was choked in a thick atmosphere of weed smoke. Bloodshot eyes and the munchies were the next phase to their little shindig. The distinctive laughter and dialogue from the movie filled the room, a comforting backdrop to the haze that hung in the air. Marcus, Maya, and Jamal had just finished their 3-gram blunt, the air thick with the scent of burnt herb and camaraderie. As the movie continued to play, Marcus rose from the black leather couch, padding off towards the kitchen, the sound of his footsteps melding with the low rumble of the movie's soundtrack playing through the surround sound. In his absence, Jamal turned to Maya, curiosity lighting up his eyes. "You think something like a museum could ever make it in Compton?" he asked, referring to the Los Angeles County Museum of Art. Maya took a brief moment before answering, her gaze fixated on the flickering TV screen. "Honestly?" She paused, a wry smile playing on her lips. "With all the gangs and dealers around here, it'd be nothing short of a miracle. That would be sweet, though unfortunately, I don't think very many people would appreciate it. Even if it did last, how long would it be before they had to close due to no business? None of these little hoodlums around here want to learn anything. Hell, half of the drug dealers on our street don't even know math. That's why they broke-ass still on the corner." Just as she finished speaking, Marcus returned, his hands suspiciously hidden behind his back. Jamal squinted at him, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Nigga, don't play, what you got?" With a triumphant grin, Marcus revealed his hidden treasure, a bottle of tequila, its golden liquid catching the dim light of the room. He waved it around like a trophy, his smile infectious. "Looks like we're not done for the night just yet," Maya chuckled, shaking her head in amusement. Marcus proceeded to pour the tequila into 3 mixed drinks, the amber liquid swirling with the soda. The room was filled with laughter, the camaraderie was like music in the house. As they clinked their glasses together, the movie continued to play. Big Worm was threatening Smokey. They spent the rest of the evening swapping stories and sharing laughs, the familiarity and warmth of their friendship enveloping them like a comforting blanket. When the movie finally ended, they were still laughing, the bottle of tequila now empty, a testament to their long evening. Day 2. The blinding morning sunlight pierced through the thin curtains, drawing groans from Marcus, Maya, and Jamal. They woke almost in unison, the remnants of last night's antics leaving them all with throbbing headaches. Cursing the early morning light, they each set about their respective morning rituals, their movements slow and pained. Maya, always the most resilient of the trio, headed for the shower, hoping the hot water would wash away the magnitude of her hangover. Marcus, on the other hand, donned a pair of sunglasses and ventured outside to check the mail, the sunlight turning the world into a harsh, unforgiving landscape around him. Even behind the protection of the shades, something only people from California could get used to. Jamal, however, was in the worst shape. His hangover had him doubled over the porch railing, purging his gut of tequila and last night's Burger King. His groans echoed around the quiet yard. He prayed for the universe to end his suffering. Immediately, Marcus sensed something was off. The usual loud activity of the neighborhood was absent, replaced by an eerie quiet. It reminded him of their walk back from the bus stop the day before, the strange emptiness that had encased their familiar streets. His suspicions deepened when he reached the mailbox and found it empty. This was impossible. They had known their mailman since they were kids. He never missed his route, and he had only been late once in their entire lives, during a particularly severe snowstorm. His absence was as unsettling as it was unusual. Concerned, Marcus hurried back to the house, his mind racing with possibilities. Once Jamal had managed to regain control over his nausea, he retreated back inside as well, the empty streets of Compton unnerving in their silence. "Something's fucked up," Marcus said, removing his sunglasses and rubbing the bridge of his nose. "The mail's not here. And it's too quiet out there. Even Azelle is gone, he's usually the first face I see out there." The 3 friends exchanged worried glances, turned on the TV. It didn't take long to find the emergency broadcast alert on loop. "Good evening, this is an emergency news broadcast from KTLA 5. We have an alarming situation developing in Compton. Authorities report that yesterday afternoon, there were sightings of individuals displaying highly unusual behavior resembling what popular culture often describes as zombies. The first sighting was late yesterday afternoon. Local law enforcement engaged a suspect who was reportedly showing signs of extreme aggression, lack of consciousness, and physical endurance beyond normal human capabilities. It is reported that it took several rounds of ammunition to subdue him. The Los Angeles Police Department, along with other local and state law enforcement agencies, is currently investigating this highly unusual incident. As of now, the exact nature of this situation remains unclear. The suspect is currently being examined by medical experts and investigators. For your safety, we strongly advise all residents of Compton and the surrounding areas to stay in their homes. Lock all doors and windows and do not venture outside unless absolutely necessary. We stress this is not a drill, but a serious situation that is currently unfolding. Residents are also urged to be vigilant and report any suspicious activity or individuals displaying similar aggressive behavior to the authorities immediately. For any emergencies, dial 911. But be patient, our local hospitals have been inundated with cases and it may take a wait to get an operator. Public health officials are also on high alert and are working closely with law enforcement to understand and manage this situation. They advise residents to maintain good hygiene practices, especially frequent hand washing, as a precaution until more is known about the situation. We will continue to provide updates on this situation as more information becomes available. Stay tuned to this station for further instructions from local law enforcement and emergency services. Your safety is our top priority. Please stay safe and remain calm. Thank you. Marcus, Maya, and Jamal stared at the blank screen, the news reports still discombobulated in their heads. Zombies. It sounded ridiculous, but the images they'd seen couldn't be denied. Zombies, and they were in Compton. Jamal shifted on the couch to reach for the water Maya brought him. The glass shook unsteady in his hand. He noticed the tremor and did his best to hide it. Marcus took the lead, his voice steady. We need to check out the neighbors. If no one's home, we take what we can. Then we hunker down here. We're going to need weapons, food and water just in case something happens to the plumbing. Remember that submarine in the 40s they were talking about at the museum? That could be us. One wrong move and this shit could go south. He waited to see if they caught his pun. Either they did and didn't react, or they were too shaken to get it. Either way, he didn't waste any time. While Marcus laid out the plan, Jamal was peering out the window, scanning the vacant street. The usual Compton clutter was being tossed around by the wind, but there was no sign of life. Marcus snapped him back to attention. Jamal, focus. Jamal turned, rolling his eyes. Chill out, nigga. I heard you. Zombies, supplies, bunker down. Did I miss anything, you bossy-ass motherfucker? Just then, Maya came in from the kitchen, a towel full of knives in one hand and their dad's baseball bat in the other. Marcus gave her a nod of approval. Good thinking, Maya. That shit ain't gonna stop the zombie apocalypse, but it'll do for now. Jamal pulled out his cell, his brow furrowed. I wonder if Mom and Dad are okay. He dialed his sister's number, but there was no signal. Not even 3G. The siblings set to work, fashioning makeshift armor out of magazines and duct tape. Then they armed themselves with the weapons Maya had gathered: knives, the bat, a hammer, anything they could find that might serve as a weapon. Marcus, Maya, stepped out of their Compton one-story house. Jamal followed close behind, eyes scanning the streets as they walked. The block felt as if holding its breath, waiting for the right moment to trigger its trap. The trio were prepared for any sign of the undead lurking around the corner. The sun shines brilliantly over the quiet streets of Compton. Marcus stood watch in the middle of the road, his senses on high alert. The air was thick with tension, only amplified by the silent streets. Maya and Jamal approached their neighbor's house, exchanging glances before Jamal rapped on the door. It swung open with an elongated creak, revealing an empty interior bathed in dim light. They stepped inside. Maya whispered, "Let's be quick. We need supplies and shit, but we don't want to fuck anything up, okay?" She waited till he was within earshot and mumbled, "Clumsy ass, don't know how to look at where you walking ass nigga." Jamal smirked, his eyes scanning the room for anything useful. "Got it, chill. We'll be in and out." They moved with stealth through the rooms, searching for food, water, and any items that might help them survive the uncertain days ahead. Maya's sharp eyes spotted a pantry, and she motioned for Jamal to join her. It was so well built that they would have missed it if not for the certain angle of light through the window in the kitchen. "Look here," she whispered, "canned goods, bottled water, and even some Kool-Aid for your stank ass. Grab as much as you can." Jamal grabbed canned goods and started stuffing them into a duffel bag. "Good find, Maya. You always know where to look. I don't know how you don't look like Jabba the Hutt." Maya grinned, a glint of mischief in her eyes. "I've got a knack for it. Leave the garbage, take the good stuff. Times are about to get as hard as carbonite." Her face turned to disappointment that Jamal didn't get the Star Wars reference. As they continued to raid the pantry, Jamal couldn't help but tease Maya. "You know, you're smart as hell, but you also have a way of getting on my fucking nerves." Maya shot him a playful glare. "It's called living life to the fullest, Jamal. You should try it sometime." Jamal chuckled, shaking his head. "Yeah, well, we'll see how that philosophy holds up in a zombie apocalypse." After filling their bags with food, water, and other essential supplies, they moved to the living room, careful not to disturb the peaceful ambience of their neighbor's home. Jamal zipped up his duffel bag and looked at Maya. "Ready to go, Maya?" Maya nodded, her expression serious now. "Yeah, let's get out of here." They exited the house as silently as they had entered, closing the door behind them. Marcus was still standing watch in the middle of the street, and they joined him. They'd been scavenging for 2 hours, scouring the abandoned homes lining their block for anything that could be of use. It seemed that Lady Luck was shining down on them when they stumbled across the stack of planks on Mr. Rutherford's back porch, timber he'd intended for a new deck. "Guess he won't be needing these anymore," Maya joked, although the humor didn't quite reach her eyes. The world felt different, and even the most mundane objects took on a new value in the face of the pending apocalypse. She rummaged through the nearby toolbox, scooping up hammers, nails, and other useful equipment. Jamal hoisted the wooden boards onto his shoulders. His strength was an asset in their new environment, and he used it without complaint. The boards were heavy, but he dragged them to their house determinedly, sweat trickling down his face. As they dumped the final pieces of wood onto the ground, a low rumble echoed through the silent neighborhood. The trio froze, each casting wary glances around. The source of the noise was unclear until, in a sudden swoosh, an American military helicopter soared overhead. They watched in stunned silence as it disappeared into the distance, heading towards the ominous columns of black smoke rising from the city. The sight filled them with a renewed sense of urgency. There was no time for hesitation, no time for fear. It was survival now, plain and simple. Marcus sprang into action, helping his sister distribute the freshly cut boards to their respective windows. Jamal, meanwhile, began the arduous process of nailing them in. The sounds of their labor echoed through the empty street, something they were painfully aware of. They hoped if there were flesh-eaters nearby the sound of their safe house construction didn't catch their attention. The usual banter, the playful jabs and sarcastic remarks, had vanished, replaced by a severity that was new to them all. Even so, here and there Marcus would speak as if to soldiers, giving them salutes as they walked past with boards. After a while Marcus fell into step with Jamal, holding boards while he nailed them into place. "You think if this shit really pops off the government's gonna come save us?" Marcus asked. "When have them grimy niggas ever came to the rescue?" "Nah, you know how this is going to play out. It's going to be us left fending for ourselves. Fuck it, we got this. I don't know where everybody went, but they didn't grab anything, so it made it easy for us. But you know what they say, some things are too good to be true. I really hope this ain't one of those times." "Shit, me neither, but that helicopter means something, you can bet on that." "Shit, Marcus, your dad ain't got no guns laying around. Honestly, I think he keeps the only one he got with him. I don't blame him, he'd be out there in the thick of it. I hope him and Moms are okay wherever they at. Did you try calling your people?" Jamal went silent. "Enough of the chit-chat, hand me that board." Day 3. When Marcus, Maya, and Jamal woke up, the morning was as lifeless as the days before. With the fear of the undead lurking in their dreams, sleep had been a luxury they couldn't afford. They had barricaded their makeshift safe house, creating a fortress amidst the chaos. Yet, the fear of the horde overrunning their defenses at any given moment kept them in a state of perpetual tension. Marcus, the eldest and de facto leader, stirred from his makeshift bed on the couch and moved towards the kitchen. The once vibrant room now held an air of melancholy, a stark reminder of the life they once had. He rummaged through the fridge, retrieving the meat that was on the verge of spoiling. The sizzle of the hamburgers on the electric skillet was the only sound that broke the eerie silence of the dawn. He browned the meat carefully, then used the remaining grease to scramble some eggs. The routine, however mundane, brought a sense of normalcy in the madness. He served the food, starting with his sister, Maya. Their meal was eaten in silence, each lost in their thoughts. Once their bellies were filled, they started discussing the next phase of their survival plan. "We can't stay locked up here forever," Jamal began. "We might have a safe house, but without weapons, ain't shit safe, fam." Here they were in Compton, an area notorious for its crime rate. The irony wasn't lost on them. In a place where guns were commonplace, they were left defenseless. Marcus nodded. "We need to know where to look. Just breaking into houses hoping for a stash won't get us anywhere. You feel me?" That's when Maya brought up Ronaldo, the neighborhood drug dealer. His constant presence on the corner had been a fixture of their lives. But since the outbreak, Ronaldo has been conspicuously absent. Jamal speculated that if Ronaldo had one gun, he was likely to have more stashed somewhere. The mention of Ronaldo brought a grim realization. Their survival would require them to venture out into the nightmare again. The same street they would play tag and jump excited when they heard the ice cream truck. The same street Marcus helped Jamal when he was getting jumped after 5th grade class. Marcus can see the very spot he slammed the bully's head from the window. The thought got him thinking, guys, what if Ronaldo's home? Maya was first to respond. "We were out there for hours. He was only across the side street. That whole time we were going in those houses he didn't come out and say nothing. And thinking back, I can't recall if I saw any movement in this house. And what's the matter in the first place?" "What are you getting at?" "What I'm saying is we might have to go out a little bit more strapped than we are." This time Jamal spoke up. "What you got in mind, homie?" Marcus left living room and went upstairs, digging around in his room for a few minutes before he came back down with the paintball gun. "Man, what you going to do with that?" "Give the motherfucker a makeover," Jamal teased. "Bro, why you trippin'? You got any better ideas?" Silence, then Maya chimed in. "Jamal, chill out, and Marcus, he kind of got a point. If you are right and he is home, what the hell are those paintball guns gonna do?" Marcus didn't respond. Instead, he went for the door. As the other two sat up and went to follow, Marcus lifted his hand. "No, y'all wait here. I ain't trying to be no hero, and I know these paintball guns ain't going to do much. But if there is a chance that we can get more strapped up, I gotta take it. I love you, sis, and Jamal, you my best friend, but this is something I know I need to do alone. If he is home, I'm going to be quiet about it just in case. If I can manage to get in and get out without any problems, we'll all be better for it." Jamal with the protest, but by Marcus's face he knew he wasn't having it. Maya shut the door behind him and watched for his brother out the window. A pang of worry struck her in the breastbone, and she felt as if some invisible timer just began to count down. She shouted from between planks, "Watch your back and don't do anything stupid out there. We need you back, Marcus." The latter she said under her breath. "Don't worry, Maya, I know that Naya since we was kids. If anybody know what they doing out there, it's him. Yo brother good at that type of shit, remember hide and seek. If your moms ain't make us come eat, we would have never found his ass." A small defeated smile hinted at Maya's lips. Marcus stepped out of the safety of their boarded-up home, the weight of the paintball gun heavy in his hands. He looked back to see Maya peering out from a tiny crack in the window. He offered her a reassuring nod, but his heart ached at the sight of his younger sister, braving the horrors of their new reality. The thought of Maya and Jamal alone at home filled him with worry, but he knew they were smart and resourceful. They'd keep each other safe until he got back. But he couldn't shake off the fear that gnawed at him. He was acutely aware of the danger that lurked outside their makeshift fortress, but he had no choice. He needed to venture out. Marcus started his walk up the block, passing the vacant houses they had already stripped of supplies. His paintball gun skinned the desolate street in a sweeping motion, but he couldn't help but feel ridiculous. He knew it was a feeble weapon against any zombies, providing only minor comfort in the face of the real threat. After crossing the street, he saw Ronaldo's house. It was a ramshackle structure, an ironic contrast to its owner's notorious reputation. Marcus set his paintball gun aside, surveying the scene. Ronaldo's house, in its state of disrepair, offered easy access. The windows and doors on the first floor were sealed tight, but an open window on the second floor caught his eye. A ladder rested against the garage in the overgrown backyard, a remnant of a world that no longer existed. Marcus moved it to the side of the house and began his climb. His heart pounded in his chest as he ascended, but so far, everything was going according to plan. The world was silent except for the creaking of the old ladder under his weight. He stepped lightly, being cautious not to snap the rotting foothold. Marcus reached the second floor and climbed through the window. As he entered, his foot slipped on the worn-out wooden floor. He reached out to grab anything for balance, but it was too late. His head hit the lid of half-used house paint, and the world spun around him. Pain radiated from the side of his head, and his vision blurred. His last thought before darkness consumed him was of Maya and Jamal, waiting for him at home. Jamal and Maya pressed their faces against the worn-out boards nailed across the windows, their eyes scanning the abandoned and eerily quiet streets for any sign of Marcus. The sun had long since set, and they couldn't shake the terrible feeling inside. Both of them thought they should have fought a little harder against Marcus leaving on his own. Maya's heart pounded, a heavy dread settling in her stomach. She thought of Ronaldo, the brutish man living in the house down the street. What if Marcus had run into him? What if their house wasn't as empty as they thought? She shook her head, trying to dispel the unnerving thoughts. Jamal, noticing her distress, squeezed her shoulder gently. "You can't think like that, Maya," he counseled, but his own voice was laced with a threat of fear. Hours had passed since Marcus had left their house, and the longer the silence stretched, the more Jamal's worry grew. The journey had begun in the morning, but night had swiftly descended, swallowing the day whole. A bitter chuckle escaped his lips as a metaphor formed in his mind. Ironic, isn't it? In a world overrun by zombies, it was the days that were being eaten by the nights, and nights devoured by the relentless passage of time. The chaotic cycle of life and death was never ending, just like their desperate struggle for survival. Maya noticed Jamal's faraway look and moved closer to him, seeking solace in his presence. Inside, she was terrified, the silence of the streets outside feeding her dread. She feared for her brother, for their safety, for their future. Suddenly, Jamal sprang to his feet, resolve flashing in his eyes. "I should go look for Marcus," he declared, his gaze fixed on the door. He broke towards it with a determined stride, but Maya's hand shot out to grab his wrist. "No, Jamal," Maya implored quickly, her voice trembling. She didn't want to admit that the thought of stepping outside, under the cloak of darkness with the threat of zombies lurking around, terrified her. But she knew one thing for certain: if Jamal ventured out, she would follow him, regardless of her fear. So, she mustered all her courage and pleaded with him, "Don't go. Please!" The room fell into silence once more, the tension thick in the air as Jamal looked at Maya, his decision hanging in the balance. Day 4. Marcus jolted awake with a piercing headache, his hand instinctively going to the source of his discomfort. An ugly lump throbbed at the side of his head, crusted over with dried blood. He grimaced, rubbing his eyes in an attempt to shake off the dizziness that threatened to consume him once more. He glanced around, trying to piece together how long he had been unconscious. He remembered the morning light, the climb up the ladder, and then, nothing. Judging by the faint light filtering through the shattered windows, only a few hours had passed, and twilight was beginning to set in. As realization dawned, Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. He was in Ronaldo's house. The room he found himself in was sparsely lit, the sun's descent casting shadows on the cluttered space. His eyes scanned the room for his paintball gun but came up empty. Deciding it was too much of a hassle to search for it in the chaotic mess, he made his way towards the door, only to stop in his tracks at the sight of a note taped to it. He unpeeled it, squinting in the dim light to make out the words. "Yo, dead body in the room. If you actually ain't dead and you're somehow reading this, come downstairs and knock on my room. If you are a zombie and somehow you're still reading this, please don't eat my brains while I'm asleep." Marcus blinked at the note in confusion and disbelief. The absurdity of the message, coupled with his pounding headache, made his stomach churn. But he did as the note instructed, pulling himself up and stumbling down the stairs. His sense of time was skewed, but the gnawing hunger in his belly suggested his estimation might have been wrong. He paused in front of Ronaldo's bedroom door. He raised his hand, the echo of his knock sounding ominously loud in the still house. Day 5. Another day had passed since Marcus's departure, each tick of the clock gnawing away at Maya and Jamal's fragile hopes. Grim thoughts began to infiltrate their minds, their imaginations painting horrifying pictures of Marcus's fate. They sat down for their breakfast, a meal only termed so due to the time of day rather than the quality of the food. Jamal's cooking skills were on par with trying to fry an ant with a magnifying glass, and Maya found herself regretting not taking over that particular duty. They ate in silence, each bite a small respite to the anxiety. Their quiet was shattered as the distant sound of gunshots echoed through the desolate neighborhood. Moments later, their worst fear was realized. The moaning of the undead reached their ears, and their hearts sank like stones in water. They were here. A prying sound from the back window made Jamal spring to his feet, his hands gripping a baseball bat. Maya quickly followed, wielding a machete she had found in the garage. One of the creatures managed to pry 2 boards loose and squeeze through the opening, leaving behind a mass of blood and decrepit skin. To their horror, it wasn't a shuffling, slow-moving zombie but a rabid, foaming lunatic, blood and saliva dripping from its lips. The creature lunged at Maya, who froze in terror. Just as it was about to reach her, Jamal swung his bat with all his might, knocking its head loose from the neck bone. The creature collapsed, but more could be heard clawing at the boards around the house. "This is it," Maya whispered to Jamal. They hugged each other, preparing for the inevitable end. Then, a loud horn honking pierced the air. They turned to see Ronaldo's Jeep parked outside their house. Without a second thought, they bolted for the door, leaving behind their once safe haven. Once they were safely in the back seat of the Jeep, they looked back at their house, now swarming with the undead. The sight was eerily reminiscent of a crying person, with zombies spilling out of the windows like tears. The Jeep sped off into the distance, leaving their past behind. As they registered their unexpected savior, fear gripped them again. They were with Ronaldo. Where was he taking them? Would it be somewhere even worse? That's when they noticed Marcus in the front seat. Maya felt a surge of relief so strong it brought tears to her eyes. Despite their terrifying ordeal, they were alive, and they were together. Day 6. After driving down the straight road for what felt like an eternity, the tense atmosphere inside the car became palpable. The monotony of the journey seemed to weigh heavily on everyone's shoulders until Jamal finally broke the silence. "What the fuck happened, Marcus?" Jamal's voice cut through the air, laced with frustration. He leaned forward from the back seat, his eyes fixed on Marcus. Marcus took a deep breath, glancing at Ronaldo, who remained focused on the road, occasionally stealing glances at Maya and Jamal in the rearview mirror. Marcus began to recount the events leading up to their hasty departure. "Well, I knocked myself out," he began, expecting Jamal to cut in. "When I made it inside I tripped on my own feet, like Maya said I would." She gave him a small smile, the best she could manage. "Must have been out for a whole day." Ronaldo chimed in, his voice calm and steady. "I was asleep when the broadcast played on the radio," he explained. "I stood on the corner for an hour, waiting for my fiends to show up. But they never did. That's when I realized that drugs don't sell themselves." Nodding in agreement, Ronaldo continued, "So, I got dressed and went out to see what was going on with my clientele. That's when I heard the broadcast. I had been talking about leaving for days, but never would have until I heard Marcus hit the floor upstairs." Curiosity burned in Jamal's eyes as he leaned in closer, his urgency evident. "So, where are we going then, nigga?" he asked, his voice tinged with impatience. Marcus picked up where Ronaldo left off. "Ronaldo's cousin has guns and a compound," he explained. "He's got connections, and he's been preparing for something like this. We can regroup there, figure out our next move. Thank God in America for preppers, right?" Maya, who had been quietly observing the conversation from the back seat, spoke up. "It sounds like a plan," she said, her voice tinged with weariness. "We need somewhere safe to gather our thoughts, assess the situation, and decide what to do next. Ronaldo says he got people, we should trust him. Looks like there ain't too many of us left." Ronaldo nodded in agreement, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Exactly," he said. "We can't keep driving aimlessly." We need a solid plan, and my cousin's compound might just be the answer. If not, it will at least give us time to gather our wits. Let's play a little game. I don't know y'all, but I know y'all. If that makes any sense, I know y'all think I'm just some dipshit trying to get the bag. But I assure you I'm far from a simple dipshit. I've been to some shitty places and done even shittier things when I was there. He paused to place fingers on a photograph of his fallen Marine comrades. Here's the game. I'll say a word, you tell me something that it relates to. I'll start with you, Maya. School? Maya took a second to think about the question, and to answer it best she could, she said. 11th grade, good at science and math, not so much as social studies. She could tell by the look he was giving her through the rearview that her answer would suffice. Jamal. Green bike? Jamal frowned. Man, I fucking knew you was going to bring that shit up. Look, I needed to get to school. My mom wasn't about to drive me, and I wasn't about to walk. I'm sorry about your bike though, for real, for real. Yeah, I ain't tripping, I just wanted to make sure it was you. I almost popped your ass tonight you took it, but I just let you go with it. Figured you needed more than I do. I got this bad, baby. Ronaldo exclaimed, slapping his hand against the steering wheel. As the car continued to speed down the road, the tension that had gripped them began to dissipate. The landscape around them changed as they ventured further west. The barren desert transformed into rolling hills and expansive fields. The sight of open skies and endless horizons brought a glimmer of optimism to their weary souls. Day 7. Maya blinked her eyes, trying to adjust to the interior of the car. Confusion washed over her as she struggled to remember the events leading up to this moment. How long had she been asleep? It was obvious they were still on that seemingly unending stretch of road they had been driving for hours. As her grogginess subsided, Maya's gaze fell upon Jamal, who was still deep in slumber beside her. She couldn't help but feel a tinge of embarrassment at their current situation. She gently nudged him, hoping to rouse him from his sleep. Jamal, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Wake up. We're almost there. Jamal stirred, his eyes fluttering open. Confusion clouded his face for a moment before realization dawned on him. He sat up, rubbing his eyes and glancing around the car. What's going on? He mumbled, his voice heavy with sleep. Maya glanced towards the front seat, where Marcus was snoring loudly. The rhythmic sound of his snores filled the tense silence within the car. She turned her attention to Ronaldo, the driver, who met her gaze through the rearview mirror. Good timing, Maya, Ronaldo said, his voice unreadable. We're about 20 minutes away from the compound. Maya nodded, her mind still foggy with sleep. She couldn't shake off the unease that settled upon her as she peered outside the car window. The scene that unfolded before her eyes was surreal and disturbing. They traveled through a landscape marred by destruction. Charred remnants of houses and vehicles dotted the surroundings, some of them still smoldering with lingering flames. It was evident that violence had taken place in this place, but the absence of dead bodies was disconcerting. Maya's heart raced, her mind trying to make sense of the bizarre sight. She exchanged a bewildered glance with Jamal, who had also noticed the eerie absence of human remains. Where are the bodies? Jamal whispered, his voice filled with a mixture of fear and curiosity. Marcus, awakened by a sudden jolt as the car hit a bump on the road, sat up abruptly. His eyes darted around, taking in the bleak landscape outside. What the hell happened here? He exclaimed, his voice seasoned with disbelief. Ronaldo, sensing the tension within the car, turned off the engine and killed the lights. The sudden silence amplified the eerie atmosphere that enveloped them. After a brief moment of palpable tension, he spoke up. We're going to have to proceed on foot, Ronaldo declared, his voice low and serious. The path to my cousin's place is treacherous. It's laced with traps and almost impossible to locate unless you know where it is. With Reynolda in the lead, they followed him through the maze of destroyed cars and broken properties, pausing here and there to peer into the burning contents of abandoned vehicles. Maya and Jamal were weaponless and felt extremely vulnerable. The sun quickly slipped behind the houses, its light losing its hold on the day. In under an hour they found themselves shambling along, their path lit but the moon and the light of the burning automobiles. Curving off the street they progressed on, they took a dirt road that faded into obscurity the farther they trekked. Finally they came to a lightly wooded area, and at the base of a tree that saw its fair share of lightning strikes. Ronaldo retrieved 2 pistols, one older and partially loaded, the other a modern Glock with a full clip and a spare. Ronaldo handed the Smith & Wesson to Marcus. "Think you can handle this? This is older than dirt. You sure it still shoots?" Ronaldo chuckled. "This motherfucker's seen me through some shit, and I doubt it's seen its last firing range. I cleaned it and tuned it up a few months ago, and last I checked everything was in working order." He dug deeper into the chest and pulled out a handful of ammo and spilled it into Marcus's sweaty palms. "That boy right there has a hell of a kick, so make sure you brace yourself before you pull that trigger." Maya said, "How you know so much about guns? I thought you just sold dope." He smiled. "I thought I told y'all, or it was obvious. I'm a jarhead. Ex-Marine. Well, I don't think X describes my relationship to the Corps that well. Look, me selling dope had nothing to do with my brothers. It was the people in charge that led me astray." "So what? They didn't pay you or something?" Maya retorted. "It's not as simple as that. To put it like this, my time in the service excluded me from more mundane occupations, so to speak. When I got out, all that was waiting for me was a security desk or police badge. I wasn't thrilled about either option. Finally, I decided to take up the good old family business and drug dealing. It wasn't hard. My brother had the clientele, and the house was abandoned when I first found it." They continued their hushed conversation, moving forward as they did. The trees thickened, and they began feeling like they were going in circles. Ronaldo's confident pace gave them a small bit of hope they were on the right path. Finally, after what seemed like an endless journey through dense terrain, they reached a clearing. The group stood still, their eyes scanning the empty patch of land. A sense of skepticism filled the air, except for Ronaldo, who appeared calm and confident. Marcus shook his head in disbelief while Jamal mirrored his actions. Maya, unable to contain her frustration, was the first to voice her protest. "This is your cousin's compound, isn't it? You're playing us, Ronaldo," she exclaimed, her voice filled with anger and suspicion. Ronaldo raised a placating hand, trying to calm the mounting tension. Without a word, he began feeling around the dirt and loose foliage, his movements purposeful and determined. His actions confused Marcus, who furrowed his brows in confusion. However, everything became clear when they heard the distinct sound of a rattling chain. Ronaldo's grip tightened as he pulled on the chain, revealing a hidden flap concealed beneath the ground. The others watched with growing curiosity as Ronaldo unveiled a dark opening below them. Jamal, cautiously intrigued, stepped forward and peered into the abyss. From within the darkness, the barrel of a gun poked out, causing him to instinctively recoil. Fear flashed across Jamal's face as he prepared to retreat. However, before he could take another step back, Ronaldo's voice rang out, urgently and unmistakably. "It's me!" The gunman hesitated, his eyes widening in surprise as he recognized his cousin Ronaldo. In that brief moment of awkward silence, the tension slowly dissipated. The gunman dropped his weapon to the ground, replaced by a genuine smile of recognition. He moved closer to Ronaldo, arms outstretched for a long-awaited embrace. Without hesitation, Jamal, Marcus, and Maya followed suit, letting go of their doubts and suspicions, and joined in the heartfelt reunion. The warmth of the moment overshadowed any lingering doubts as Ronaldo's cousin welcomed the 4 weary travelers into the hidden bunker. As they descended into the depths of the underground sanctuary, the dimly lit interior revealed itself to be a place of refuge and safety. The air was cool but stale, and it carried a sense of solace that washed away the weariness accumulated during their arduous trip. The bunker was equipped with necessities to sustain life underground. There were provisions, water, and even a makeshift living area. It was clear that Ronaldo's cousin had spent considerable time and resources preparing for uncertain times. As they settled in, Ronaldo's cousin explained the reason for his hidden bunker. He revealed that he had become aware of impending dangers, unseen threats that lurked in the shadows of society. With a sense of duty and responsibility towards his family, he had made it his mission to create a safe haven in case disaster struck. "Smart move," Marcus said. He shook the man's hand and continued. "I would have been one of those cats that said you were nuts. Now, shit. I wish my dad was a little more paranoid." The mention of his parents filled his mind with unwelcome thoughts. He didn't want to think about his parents right now. Maya was his responsibility. As she's always been, he knew now he would be all she had. Marcus looked for Jamal, but he was already in cahoots with one of the preppers. examining his sidearm and complimenting its maintenance. Marcus could tell the man was perplexed. He knew Jamal had a strange affinity for guns, and their recent trip to the museum fueled his interest in antique weapons. He allowed Marcus and the balding white man to continue their enthusiastic conversation while he turned to more serious matters. He pulled Ronaldo and his cousin, who introduced himself as Salvador, aside. "I appreciate what you've done here, but we are strangers and we don't want to complicate what you have here." "Nonsense," Sal said. He smiled and continued. "Yeah, I prepped this for myself, my family and friends. But we went a little overboard on supplies. I'm not saying we're gonna eat good forever, but even with your mouths added to our table, we have enough to survive for a year or more. Normally I wouldn't extend this kind of invitation to anyone that knows my cousin. But you guys seem like a smart young bunch, and if this is the apocalypse, we're going to need youngins like you to repopulate." Marcus lifted an eyebrow. "Not like that, bro. I mean, who knows what it's like up there. Before we sealed up, we fought our way here. And let me tell you, it's nothing like you see in the movies. They ain't just brain-dead shambling corpses. They were hungry and determined, so we went through. I don't know how many rounds, we only killed 20 or so before we escaped. And if y'all didn't see any up there, I take it they lost our trail and moved on. I'm not for sure how long this peace will last, but with 4 extra hands we should have this place tightened down before the hordes come." A low rumble began and the familiar swoosh of a helicopter propeller passed overhead. "You see, Uncle Sam is taking it to the zombie fucks. We just got to hunker down and hope they get the job done. With that being said, we need to start now. We have few precious minutes of sunlight left and a lot to do. Follow me." Marcus motioned for Jamal to join them at the companionway. Before they started up the ladder, Maya yelled out, "Wait, so y'all just gonna leave me with these crazy doomsday folks?" Ronaldo returned to the threshold. "Hey, I know they look crazy, but you are in safe hands. We're only going up to hide the entrance and make one more round for supplies. Sal says there's some cars that are intact on the road we came in on, so we thought it would be best to look for anything we could use in the trunks before we locked up." She dropped her shoulders in defeat. "Come on, honey," a heavy-set blonde woman called to her. "Come sit with us. We was just about to start meal prep. You don't have to help, but we could use the new blood. Betty's stories are getting old, and half the time the bitch is making shit up anyway." Hey, an offended voice came from deeper in the bunker. "I did sing backup for Ari the Franklin." "Sure you did, Kathy, sure you did." The woman who the others called Cheryl said under her breath. "Now come on, let the boys go risk their necks, well, risk our fingers. These knives are sharp and these lights ain't worth a shit." She smiled and followed Cheryl to a circle of women chopping and cleaning various veggies. The door to the underground bunker creaked open, revealing the pitch-black tunnel that led to the surface. Marcus was the first to emerge, his eyes adjusting to the light as he scanned the area for any signs of zombies. Jamal followed closely behind, and Ronaldo brought up the rear. As they stepped onto solid ground, Marcus turned to Ronaldo and nodded appreciatively. "Thanks for letting us in, homie. We owe you one." Jamal chimed in with a smirk. "Yeah, at least you didn't shoot Marcus when he broke into your crib." Ronaldo chuckled. "I thought about it, but with zombies roaming the streets, I figured it was unnecessary to take a living person's life. Plus y'all youngins never gave me no shit. I had no reason to take my itchy trigger finger out on him." Marcus nodded in gratitude but didn't let Ronaldo forget why they had been at his house in the first place. "Don't think we're stupid enough to rob you, Ronaldo. We know you sell drugs, and we figured you were probably strapped. We didn't really care about the drugs, we were looking for guns. Thought maybe we'd get lucky if you weren't home. We had no intention of stealing them, well, only borrowing them." Ronaldo raised an eyebrow, his face revealing amusement. "You would have been disappointed, my friend. All my guns are right here with us." Jamal, ever the inquisitive one, couldn't help but ask, "Why the hell did you stash your guns so far away from your trap spot?" Ronaldo leaned against the bunker's entrance and sighed. "I couldn't take the chance of catching a gun and drug charge. So, I decided to stash my firearms near my cousin's bunker." This answer only piqued Jamal's curiosity further. "Cousin's bunker? You call this place a compound. What's the story behind that?" Ronaldo gestured toward the vast underground structure they were standing above. "Well, it used to be a compound, at least. When my cousin was younger, he and his neighbors started a sort of hippie commune. They lived off the land, shared everything, the whole deal. It lasted for about 2 years until they realized they were only wasting time and the world was getting crazier by the day. So, they all chipped in and decided to take their compound underground. Marcus and Jamal exchanged glances, both surprised and intrigued by the story. Ronaldo continued, "It took them the better part of 2 years, but they built this place, miles of stone and steel beneath the field we're standing in right now. It's surrounded by trees, hidden from prying eyes. It's been a sanctuary for us and anyone else they trusted ever since." The trio stood there in silence, taking in the enormity of what Ronaldo had just shared. They had stumbled upon a new ally and a hidden underground fortress, a relic of a time when people sought refuge from the outside world. Little did they know that this place would soon become their refuge as well, a sanctuary in the midst of a world gone feral. Ronaldo, with a sense of trust established, handed his Glock over to Jamal without hesitation, his expression firm yet reassuring. He then nodded to Marcus, silently acknowledging that they were all in this together. Marcus, not as well versed in firearms as Ronaldo, carefully examined the barrel of his revolver, making sure the rounds were properly chambered. He might not have been a gun expert, but even he could see that the bullets were in place. Jamal couldn't help but ask Ronaldo, "What about you?" Ronaldo responded with a sly smile and began to walk towards a nearby tree. The tree had been cleverly disguised amidst the surrounding foliage, but now that Ronaldo was standing next to it, it became apparent. He felt around the base of the tree until his fingers found a concealed latch. With a firm press, a hidden door, cleverly disguised by debris and tree bark, swung open to reveal an MP5 submachine gun. 2 curved magazines hung next to it. Without uttering a word, Ronaldo fastened one of the magazines to the bottom of the MP5 and slipped the other into his cargo pants leg pocket. The unspoken understanding was that they needed to be prepared for anything, and this weapon would certainly help. With their impromptu armament secured, they began to spread out. Ronaldo, with his SMG slung over his shoulder, focused on pulling branches and foliage to block the entrance to the bunker from prying eyes. The other 2 started searching the abandoned vehicles that lined the road they had come from. Most of their searches yielded little of value. But as they neared the end of a long row of cars, their eyes landed on a vehicle with surfboards strapped to its roof. Thoughts of coolers full of delectable goodies or perhaps some party favors raced through their minds, and they hurried over to the car. Their initial excitement was nearly dashed when they found no such coolers. But as they began their cycle of doubt, Jamal's keen nose detected the faintest aroma of ganja. The unmistakable scent led him to the back hatch, which was secured with a crisscross pattern of bungee cables. They wasted no time in unfastening the ends and lifting the tailgate. As soon as they opened the hatch, the pungent scent of high-quality marijuana smacked them in the face. Marcus couldn't help but close his eyes briefly, the aroma was that delightful. Nestled inside a duffel bag filled with clothes, they discovered a tightly rolled bag containing what had to be 3 ounces of some top-notch cannabis. Next to the bag, an unopened drone case sat waiting. They eagerly scooped up the drone and the bag of weed, realizing that these unexpected finds might prove invaluable. With their newfound treasures in hand, they made their way back to Ronaldo in the woods. Ronaldo had been meticulously arranging branches and foliage to camouflage the bunker entrance, and Jamal couldn't help but be impressed. If he hadn't known it was there, he would have been none the wiser to its existence. With a smirk, Jamal nodded towards Marcus, who held the drone case like a prized trophy and the bag of weed as his consolation prize. "Nice work, guys," Ronaldo said, acknowledging their contributions. "Now we're better armed and have some extra supplies. We'll need them in the days to come, and shit, you even managed to score some reefer. Tonight won't be so boring after all." Day 8. The underground bunker was a world of its own, a hidden refuge where time seemed to stand still. Assigned to their respective bunks, Jamal and Marcus were the first to rise, their bodies slowly adjusting to the underground rhythm of life. The soft hum of the ventilation system and the gentle glow of yellow LED lights lining the ceiling added to the surreal atmosphere. Almost claustrophobic, the area would have seemed tighter from the outside. But overnight they adapted to the space and found it to be more comforting than constricting. As Jamal poked his head out from his bunk, he gazed down the slender stone corridor that stretched beyond their sleeping quarters. The precision-cut passageway played tricks on the eyes, creating the illusion of an infinite hallway disappearing into the distance. Maya stirred in her bunk shortly after, her curiosity piqued by the enticing aroma of sizzling bacon. With the bacon's beckoning call, Maya swung her feet from her bunk and hit the floor with a sense of purpose. She wasted no time and headed in the direction of the mouth-watering scent. Jamal exchanged a knowing look with Marcus, and without a word, the two followed Marcus's sister down the corridor. The passage was so narrow that they had to walk single file, their shoulders brushing against the cold stone walls. At the threshold of the hallway, they found themselves in what appeared to be the compound's kitchen. Cheryl, with her warm and welcoming presence, noticed Maya's arrival and her face lit up with a smile. "Oh, there you are, honey," Cheryl said, addressing Maya. "I thought you three would have slept the day away. But I don't blame you. From what I heard, you put in a lot of work before you found your way here. I don't mean to make it sound like your efforts were wasted, but you're more than welcome to stay here. There's no reason for you to fend for yourselves out there. We have plenty for now, and with your contributions, I think we can make this work." The trio exchanged grateful glances before taking their seats at the dining table. The morning was filled with the comforting sounds of a shared meal, silverware clinking against plates, the occasional slurp of hot coffee, and the soft murmurs of conversation. As they indulged in the delicious breakfast, Maya couldn't help but compliment. "Marcus," she said between bites, "you're a hell of a cook, but this bacon, this makes your culinary skills seem like blasphemy." Marcus chuckled, his face tinged with a hint of embarrassment. "I'm fine with that," he said, and he wasn't lying. As proud as he was of his own skills on the stove, this was so good it made him want to cry. "I'm happy to take, oh my god," he said, shoveling another steaming spoonful of egg into his gullet. "So, tell me about yourselves," Shirley said, a smile stretching across her face. Marcus, being the first to finish, answered her inquiry. "I'm Marcus, and, I don't know, what do you want to know?" Her smile seemed to intensify. "Well, let's start off simple. What are you most passionate about?" The question seemed to have stumped him for a second. He waited a moment to think it over, then replied. "Sports, I guess. I haven't ever really been good at much else. I mean, my grades are passable, but to say I'm a scholar would be cap. I didn't expect to get a scholarship or nothing. I just love to play." "Love to play?" He corrected himself. "I just don't know what that matters in this fucked up world now." Maya slapped his arm. "Hey, profanity. You know better, Marcus. Show some respect." Cheryl lifted a hand. "Oh, it's quite all right, sweetie. I don't expect you kids to act much like kids. Even if you were innocent kids with no issues in life, this world would swallow you whole if that were the case. You are here for a reason, and hell, this is still America, right? I can't stop you from speaking your mind how you wish to speak it." Marcus nodded and continued. "I wanted to be a quarterback, not because of the rank and position, but the duties of the mantle. I think I was built for that shit. I can't help but realize that the position meant more to me than just throwing touchdowns and leading the team to victory. Being a quarterback was about more than just football. It was about responsibility and leadership. It was about knowing that when the game was on the line, my teammates counted on me to make the right call, to read the defense, and to deliver the perfect pass." "I can see that," Cheryl commented. "You have the look of a leader, and I can tell these two look up to you." "Yeah, 'cause the nigga tall as fuck," Jamal chimed in, getting a firm first to the upper arm from Maya, who gave him a death stare only she was capable of giving, one she often used when he was being unreasonable or rude. Cheryl laughed, full and deeply. She continued to laugh, hysterically, until she complained her sides hurt and she whipped fresh tears from her clenched eyes. When she finally caught enough of her wind back, she stood up, taking their plates with her in a stack to the sink. "Where does the water go?" Marcus asked. She turned around and beckoned him to come close, showing him the pipe leading to some contraption under the floor. "What's that go to?" he asked. "It leads to a filtration system, much like most of the used water and byproducts of living around here do. Everything we use or expel from or with our bodies, somehow or another gets converted into something useful and reusable. What isn't useful, I'll show you later where that all goes." She turned to Jamal, asking, "What about you? Were you always this funny? Or does impending doom always bring this side of you out?" He smirked. "Before all this madness with the zombies, a few days ago, if you can believe it, I used to dream about being a comedian or a rapper, if I ever managed to find some rhythm in me. Maya, she always joked that I was tone deaf, and she wasn't entirely wrong. But what I lacked in musical talent, I made up for in capturing a room's attention and keeping it with laughter. I'd been the class clown since 2nd grade, back when I met Marcus, and eventually, Maya, too. Those were simpler times when we could laugh at life's bullshit without fearing for our survival. We've only seen a few since this popped off, but I'm not sure I want to see any. You know me, Marcus and Maya always joked about doing badass shit in the event of something like this. Now that it's here, I don't know. Fuck all that risking my own life shit, but I can't lie, it would be fun to blast a few. As Cheryl diligently washed the dishes from their hearty breakfast, she turned her attention to Maya, eager to learn more about the newest members of their underground sanctuary. Before she could dive into her questions, Ronaldo and his cousin Salvador entered the kitchen, drawing everyone's attention. "Hey, Jamal and Marcus," Ronaldo began, "how about going on a scouting mission today? With that drone you found yesterday, it could make things a lot safer and easier. Plus our friend Fresco has the lead on a pack of wild pigs not too far. I think we can kill 2 birds with 1 stone if you catch my drift." Salvador chimed in, his voice a touch more playful. "And guess what? We hooked the battery pack up to the silent generator last night, and it looks to be fully charged. So we're about to get a better understanding of our situation. I know y'all heard the helicopters. They're all heading north. I don't know the range on this thing, but maybe we can ascertain where they're heading." Jamal's face suddenly lit up with realization, and he couldn't help but remember the giant stash of weed he had stashed in his backpack back in his bunk. Before he could bring it up, Ronaldo, always quick to spot an opportunity, saw the recollection on Jamal's face. He looked to his cousin, and with a sly grin, Salvador reached behind his ear and pulled out a humongous joint, causing the whole room to erupt in a resounding damn. The tone reminiscent of the famous scene in Friday. Jamal's eyes widened with delight, and Marcus stepped closer, curiosity piqued. Salvador chuckled and said, "What's breakfast without dessert?" After an hour of hiking through the woods, they found themselves at what Salvador referred to as the edge of the compound. To Marcus and Jamal's knowledge, this was as far as Ronaldo's cousin and his companions had ventured. The property line flush with a river that ran perpendicular to their position. The embers of the burning vehicles and houses now produced only rising plumes of black smoke. The city of Buckhorn was a shell of its former self, visible across the river that separated them from its devastation. They had chosen this area to conduct their reconnaissance from. Ronaldo used what he remembered from his time in the Marines to cloak their presence and set up tripwires around the perimeter. Salvador unboxed the drone and helped Marcus connect it to the only working cell phone they had. Marcus couldn't help but wonder why Salvador and his compound members didn't have cell phones in the first place. He voiced his curiosity, asking, "Salvador, why didn't you and your people have phones or tablets and shit? Not like they're of any use now, but damn man, were y'all really that far off the grid?" Salvador, still focused on the task at hand, replied without missing a beat, "We gave up on social media and the grid a few years ago. We got tired of all that shit, and nowadays with all the political nonsense, we felt our collective slowly separating over useless beliefs. And shit man, look, we were right sort of. All the good having a government did. You see that are there, that's what tax-paying citizens get for their hard-earned money. Dead. We opted for satellite phones instead, thinking they'd be more reliable. But in times like these, it seems even they are just as useless as Jamal's phone." Jamal, engrossed in snapping pictures of a praying mantis on a nearby tree, seemed oblivious to the conversation. Marcus decided to keep his thoughts about Jamal's apparent disinterest to himself, recognizing that there wasn't much Jamal could do to help at this moment. With their fingers crossed, they nearly jumped in excitement when the connection between the phone and the drone was solidified. The device whirred to life, its camera feed revealing a high-definition image of Buckhorn's devastated streets. The once bustling city now lay in ruins, its buildings reduced to charred skeletons, and the occasional plume of smoke drifting skyward. Marcus and Salvador watched the footage intently, noting any signs of movement or unusual activity. They knew they needed to gather as much information as possible to plan their next moves. This was just the beginning of their journey to uncover the truth about the mysterious events that had befallen Buckhorn and possibly the rest of the world. It wasn't lost on them the irony of the situation. Preppers and had kids, just as valuable in a world of flesh-eating corpses. Maybe this is what the world needed all along. A good old apocalypse to make us forget our differences. Marcus wondered how many hours he wasted in useless arguments about things he only half-heartedly believed in. How many countless opportunities he let slide to learning something that might have proved useful now. Like when his father turned blue in the face daily trying to convince him, Boy Scouts aren't for sissies. How tying a knot would be more useful knowledge than what shoes his favorite rapper wore. Come to think of it, it had been so long since he heard music, he couldn't recall the last track he played. These thoughts came to a halt when on the phone's display they saw the first signs of movement. They watched intensely for any more evidence on the screen, leaning closer until they were almost head to head. There it was, something darting from spot to spot, almost as if trying to avoid detection. Salvador, not that great of a pilot, couldn't steady the drone. "Here, let me see." "I played a lot of GTA, if this thing is anything like the Avenger." "I'm sure I can handle it." Without protest, Salvador handed over the controls. It took a few seconds, but once Marcus got a feel for the controls, it's like the drone was an extension of himself. He weaved between branches and power lines to get a better view. To their surprise, it wasn't a zombie at all. Jamal was now looking over Salvador's shoulder. "It's a girl?" he said. In a synchronized movement, Salvador and Marcus traded glances. Marcus lowered the drone and tried to maintain a smooth pace, trying his best not to startle the girl. She looked cold, hungry, and terrified. Once the drone was within earshot, it caught her attention. Her expression was akin to a stranded soul making contact with a passing plane. She waved her arms frantically. But once it got closer, they noticed her body language was abnormal. She was gesturing in a direction to her left. After a brief moment of brain paralysis, Marcus finally caught on to the message. He picked up altitude and swirled the drone in the indicated direction, just over a tree line that separated a park from the next street ahead. Was a crowd that reminded Jamal of a Pantera concert in Moscow his skater friend showed him. A massive sea of shambling corpses rocked in place, stupefied and apparently unaware of the drone. Marcus whizzed backwards and dropped to the girl's level again. Using the return to home feature on the drone's controller, they prayed the girl would follow it back to them, and not the festival of carnage that lay beyond. Ronaldo watched through his binoculars as the drone returned to their concealed position in the woods. Collectively, everyone's hearts felt as if they could leap from their chests. They had been anxiously awaiting the lone woman. She moved remarkably quiet for someone as desperate as she was to flee the undead. Swiftly she bobbed under branches, slid across the hoods of cars, and made her way closer and closer to the river. Through the woman's perspective, she saw the drone lift up over the river ahead and then lower into the trees beyond it, revealing the group waiting for her. Marcus, Jamal, Salvador, and Ronaldo were all waiting for her to come to them. She glanced behind her periodically to make sure the horde of zombies didn't hear her as she silently ran, quickly approaching the riverbank. Reaching into his bag, Ronaldo retrieved a rope meant for tying up game they might have caught and threw it out to the woman as a lifeline. She grabbed onto it tightly, her panting breaths betraying her exhaustion. With the combined effort of the men, they pulled the woman to safety, away from the river's edge. Once they had her beyond the tree line and with them, they immediately started pulling off their extra articles of clothing, including hoodies, a shirt, and even Jamal's sweatpants to replace her soaking attire. Jamal was left in his basketball shorts underneath as the woman shamelessly stripped and began changing into the dry clothes. The men showed her respect and decency, turning away from her as she underwent her transformation from sopping wet to dry and clothed. It was an act of compassion, born out of the dire circumstances they all found themselves in. The woman paid them no mind in her desperate need to get out of her wet clothes and into something dry and warm. She simply muttered a heartfelt thank you once she was properly dressed, not realizing the awkwardness of the changing situation until now. She was too cold and shell-shocked for any further inquiries, so instead they abandoned their hunting phase of their plans. They traveled in a formation that kept the newcomer between them at all times. None present knew the reason even if they noticed. Maybe some innate sense of masculine duty baked into their DNA, or the underlying compassion and protection they felt it was only right to offer someone in such dire straits. Either way, it was a small comfort to the trembling woman, who was grateful yet apprehensive of her never-traveling companions. She had watched The Walking Dead, and many other similar movies that were strangely relevant now, and knew all too well the desires of men and desperation of survival. but she felt this unshakable feeling of security. Having just spent the last 7 days foraging and scavenging for the smallest of moralis, she was borderline malnutritioned and extremely dehydrated. As if he felt her needs, Marcus stopped and kneeled. Retrieving a water bottle from the side of his backpack, he handed it to the woman. "Thank you," she said. "Bailey. My name is Bailey," she choked off the last words. "I'm sorry, damn it. It's been days since I've talked to another person. I was about to." She trailed off. Marcus, in a soft voice, said, "It's okay, you're okay now." The rest of the walk back was awkwardly silent. Her confused face when they reached the empty clearing was amusing to Jamal. Her face when he pulled the hatch up by the chain was even more so. Inside, Maya practically tackled Marcus upon first sight. He braced himself, not expecting this kind of reaction from his sister. "What's the matter? We weren't even gone that long." "The fuck's wrong with you, sis? I heard a loud bang. That was hours ago. I thought y'all shot something or one of y'all got shot." Before Marcus or Jamal could voice their confusion, light spilled from the shaft leading to the surface. Everyone tensed. Their muscles had a death grip on their bones until they heard the cheers of 2 men returning from another successful hunt. The still trembling Bailey, Marcus, and the rest of his party were not as thrilled. Salvador emerged from the bustling crowd of survivors in the underground bunker, his eyes scanning the faces of his team. He had a grim expression etched on his weathered face, a look that could only mean business. "Boys," he called, his voice sharp and demanding. The hunters turned to face him, their brows furrowing in confusion. Salvador wasted no time, getting straight to the point. "Where did you make the kill?" Edward shifted uncomfortably. "By the river, just under a half an hour ago." As the words left his lips, a heavy silence descended upon the group. Salvador exchanged a knowing glance with his fellow survivors. They had feared this moment would come, but they hadn't expected it so soon. Jamal stepped forward and explained, "We found Bailey here while we were scouting. She was dangerously close to an unrealistically large horde of fucking zombies. It had to have been thousands of them." Maya chimed in, "Yo fuckheads might have got their attention." "That ain't good. It ain't good at all." Salvador nodded in agreement, his gaze never leaving Ed's face. With the matter at hand addressed, they needed to take action quickly. He gestured for the hunters to follow him as he headed toward a large freezer unit deeper in the bunker. Their claim was placed in the freezer units, deep within the bowels of the base. The hunters obediently placed their kill inside the freezer. Back at the main entrance, Salvador turned to the hatch, which led to the world above. He knew that what they had seen in the drone footage wasn't just a minor threat. These were full-fledged zombies, albeit slower-moving ones. It was far more than enough to overwhelm this oasis under the dirt. Jamal once again found irony in the situation. The living hiding underground from the dead, Marcus stepped closer to Maya, noticing she was trembling. She shrugged him off. "Go help her. She needs it." "I'm fine." "You sure, sis?" Marcus asked incredulously. Bailey was focused on her own shaking hands when he approached slowly and as non-threatening as he could. She noticed his effort and dropped her guard, relaxing a bit. He saw his frame visibly deflate. He reached to catch her as she fainted. In his grasp, he lowered the unconscious stranger to the floor, putting his backpack under her head for support. Salvador stepped outside, feeling the cool underground air against his skin. He scanned the area for any signs of approaching danger. There was no time to waste. He signaled to his people through a series of hand gestures, a language they had developed over time in the confines of their underground sanctuary. It was time to spread the message down the network of stone tunnels and buried storage containers that they called their safe house. At Salvador's command, the overhead lights dimmed, and a hush fell over the entire bunker. The survivors, now well practiced in responding to these signals, froze in place. The only sound that could be heard was the distant, echoing moans of the approaching undead. Maya prayed to God for the first time since she was 7. Day 9. In the oppressive darkness of the underground bunker, stillness reigned. The survivors, huddled in silence, could feel the weight of the world pressing down upon them. Marcus, his brow furrowed with worry, kept a vigilant watch over the unconscious Bailey. Her shallow breaths and sporadic eye movements were the only signs that she was still with them. Jamal stood nearby, a silent sentinel by the entrance to the hatch. His eyes were fixed on the metal portal that separated them from the world above, where the relentless footsteps of the undead echoed down the shaft. They found themselves ready for the inevitable. Ronaldo, his grip trembling, held his MP5 at the threshold, equally ready for the unthinkable. He prayed to a god he hadn't spoken to in years, hoping that it wouldn't come down to him having to open fire on the oncoming corpses. The metallic taste of fear lingered in his mouth as he stared at the hatch, willing it to remain undisturbed. The entire underground community of survivors remained as silent as they could, their breaths shallow, their hearts pounding. Each one of them knew that their lives depended on maintaining this oppressive silence. The earth above them groaned with the weight of the undead horde, the very ground trembling under the burden. Presently, a new sound reached their ears, a shuffling, scraping noise. It was the unmistakable sound of zombies stepping on the well-hidden hatch above. The metal groaned in protest, and for a moment, it seemed as though the hatch might give way. Panic tightened its grip on their hearts, and the survivors held their collective breath. Marcus shared a worried glance down at Bailey, as her eyelids fluttered, and in the suffocating silence of the underground bunker, Ronaldo leaned closer to his cousin, his voice a whisper. Ronaldo began, his words lost in the heavy air of the chamber. Salvador and Ronaldo looked at Marcus and nodded, his eyes never leaving the faces of his friends and Bailey. He knew that they were all thinking the same thing, that their options were running thin, and that the undead horde above was unrelenting. As they maintained their silence due to the zombie menace, Salvador broke away from the hushed conversation with Ronaldo. He gave a curt nod to Marcus before silently heading down the dimly lit hall. Marcus, Maya, and Jamal, along with a few other original members of the underground compound, followed Salvador without a word. The narrow hallway was made from buried shipping containers, a makeshift passage that led deeper into the bowels of their hidden sanctuary. The rhythmic echoes of their footsteps were a stark contrast to the ominous sounds of the undead above. They walked as lightly as they could as they headed deeper into the earth. It was amazing how much work they put into this place, Maya thought. At the end of the 7-container-length hallway, they reached a massive blast-proof door. It was a portal to the heart of their underground network, a central bunker designed to withstand anything the world could throw at it. Salvador turned the heavy wheel, and with a hiss of escaping air, the doors slowly swung open. They stepped into a soundproof chamber, and the change was palpable. The relentless moaning of the undead was replaced by an almost eerie quiet. When the door sealed behind them, a collective sigh of relief escaped their lips. Salvador took the lead once more, moving to a control panel on the wall. With a few deft keystrokes, he triggered the overhead lights, revealing the secret within this hidden chamber. Between layers of soundproofing material were rows upon rows of gun racks, enough weapons to arm a small nation for victory. Marcus, Maya, and Jamal, who had grown up in the rough streets of Compton, stood in awe before this arsenal of firepower. It dwarfed even the most heavily armed neighborhoods they had known back above ground. The gun racks held an assortment of firearms, from rifles to shotguns, handguns to submachine guns. Piles of ammunition were neatly stacked beside them, along with an array of gadgets and tactical gear. Salvador spoke, "We can't just hide down here forever. If we're going to survive, we need to take back the surface. These weapons give us a fighting chance. My people have training, and you kids are from Compton. So we'll call your experience training by proxy. I take it you know how some of these work. If not, me or any one of my people can assist." He triggered another well-camouflaged panel that unhinged 2 latches on the ceiling. These turned out to be TVs connected to some CCTV network above ground, including some well-placed remote trail cams. These revealed that their problem was serious, but not as dire as they thought. Almost manageable. Luckily, they had contingency plans for such things. "We need to plan and execute ASAP. We have fireworks hooked to a cell phone a mile down the trail. And outside these doors opposite the ones you came in, there's a path to a few back exits we dug last May. If we can make a distraction loud and long enough, we can flank these flesh-eating fucks and pin them into a designated kill zone. And once they're free and out in the open, that's when you guys and 2 teams of my people open fire." Marcus interjected, "Won't that draw more from the surrounding area?" Ronaldo grinned. "No sir, we have something else up our sleeve. A few days ago we took a risky trip out to Devon out there's trailer. He calls himself a traveling DJ. Turns out all that bullshit turned out to be useful. I was skeptical. He ruined my sister's wedding. I was glad to see he learned from the events, because what we set up might just help us. The trio looked confused for a second, then shrugged it off. Day 10. The clearing was a tapestry of decay, painted with over 1,000 zombies. They shuffled and groaned, a morbid army of the undead caught in a macabre dance of death. The moonlight glimmered off their rotting flesh, casting silhouettes that stretched out towards the darkened woods beyond. Suddenly, the sky was split by a kaleidoscope of color. Fireworks exploded over the river, their brilliant hues reflecting off the shimmering water. The abrupt light show stole the zombies' attention, their decaying heads turning in unison towards the spectacle. As if enchanted by the display, they began to shamble forwards towards the river, drawn by the bright lights and the echoing booms. A mile away, hidden amidst the dense foliage, a hatch creaked open. Ronaldo and Salvador emerged first, their eyes scanning the distant horde of zombies. Their fingers rested on the triggers of their weapons, a tangible tension hanging in the air around them. Salvador reached down, his sturdy hand reaching into the hatch to assist the next arrivals. Marcus and Maya emerged, helped to their feet by Salvador. They stood shoulder to shoulder, a pair of siblings locked in a perpetual rivalry. They busied themselves with checking their gear, each trying to outdo the other in their preparations. Marcus brandished a custom-made assault rifle, polished to a gleaming shine, while Maya showcased her twin Glocks, each one carefully honed to deadly precision. Jamal was next, his usually jovial demeanor replaced by an uncharacteristic seriousness. His eyes darted between the approaching zombies and the group's surroundings. As the others emerged from the hatch, he directed them to take cover behind nearby trees, ensuring they were shielded from the advancing horde. Once everyone was out, he began to cover the hatch with debris and branches, his actions methodical and efficient. They stood, 12 strong, each equipped with gear that screamed of a hefty price tag. Rifles and shotguns gleamed in the colorful light, ammunition pouches bulging with supplies. The light of the distant fireworks illuminated their faces. The tension was palpable, an electric current that ran through the group, but they were ready. Salvador's radio crackled to life, a signal that another round of fireworks was about to start. As the first rocket shot into the sky, exploding in a shower of sparks, the group steeled themselves. The zombies, once again distracted by the spectacle, started to shamble towards the new source of light and sound. The group didn't hesitate. As the zombies began their slow march, they opened fire. The first shots rang out, a symphony of defiance against the night and the monstrosities it hid. The sound of gunfire echoed through the clearing, mixing with the distant explosions of the fireworks. The group's well-practiced precision took over, each member targeting specific zombies, aiming for the head with deadly accuracy. Marcus and Maya, in their eternal sibling rivalry, vied for the highest body count. They fired, their shots finding their marks, dropping zombies with every pull of the trigger. Salvador led the way, flanked by 7 brave volunteers from the bunker. They pressed forward, their boots crunching on the underbrush, and their collective breaths fogging up in the chilly night air. They were a force to be reckoned with, their guns spitting out walls of lead that mowed down the advancing horde of zombies. As the gunfire echoed through the clearing, the zombies became more alert, their shambling steps quickening into an ungainly trot. The horde was thickening, their numbers seemingly multiplying with each passing second. Ronaldo, sensing the escalating threat, reached for his grenades. One by one, he pulled the pins and lobbed them into the gathering undead. Each explosion was a bram hit of destruction, showering the area with decaying body parts and a deluge of putrid bodily fluids. The stench was enough to choke a maggot, a nauseating grotesque spectacle. Meanwhile, Marcus, Maya, and Jamal stood side by side, gripping their guns with grim determination. They were familiar with firearms, but shooting them, especially in such a dire situation, was a first. The experience, as terrifying as it was, grudgingly earned their respect for these dangerous tools. Marcus' gun clicked empty, signaling the need for a reload. Jamal, catching on quickly, widened his spread of fire to compensate for the gap in their defense. As Marcus fumbled with the new magazine, Jamal's shots filled the air, each bullet finding its mark in a grotesque ballet of death. The ones that missed still had lethal grazing effects in nearby crawlers. On the other side, Maya, despite having a semi-automatic, chose to pull the trigger in short, controlled bursts. Each pull was deliberate, her aim true, as she focused on accuracy over speed. Her bullets punched through the rotting flesh of the zombies, dropping them to the ground in a morbid thwack. Finally, Ronaldo's gun ran dry as well, the last bullet leaving the barrel with a final, echoing report. Marcus, his gun reloaded, glanced up to see the look of grim on Ronaldo's face. He nodded to Maya, who immediately comprehended his silent message. With a swift motion, she unslung an extra MP5 from her shoulder and tossed it to Ronaldo. The gun, previously slung across her body like an unconventional purse, was now a lifeline for their comrade. Suddenly, the distant fireworks ceased, their ephemeral light show over. The darkness seemed to close in around them, the only illumination coming from the sporadic muzzle flashes of their guns. That's when the screams began. Two of the bunker fighters were overwhelmed by a wall of undead, clawing and snapping their jaws shut so hard they cracked teeth. When the tools of their trade finally found home, the screams were deafening. Salvador, in an act of compassion and proactively opened fire on the dog pile of corpses. Praying one of his rounds put his comrades out of their misery. The horde pressed on, tripping on the growing pile of feasting fiends. Maya held back tears and wished her ears had an off switch. Jamal let out a battle cry and advanced from their line's position. In his best Pacino impression screamed, "Say hello to my little friend." Marcus chimed in, "You fucking cockroaches." They spent the rest of their ammunition and retreated behind Maya, who held the zombies at bay with the last working gun. Ronaldo tried to stay behind and help up one of the fallen bunker fighters. He was tackled to the ground by a zombie that ate his face in front of them. Salvador screamed in rage and pulled the machete loop through a string in his belt line. He hacked and slashed as the last rounds in Maya's MP5 left the chamber. Marcus and Jamal reacted swiftly, their hands closing around Maya's arm in a vice-like grip. With a force that sent her empty gun clattering to the ground, they dragged her away from the horde of encroaching zombies. Her finger twitched in the air, still mimicking the motion of pulling the trigger, a phantom echo of the action ingrained in her muscles. Salvador, meanwhile, was a whirlwind of action. His blade flashed in the moonlight, slashing through the undead with ruthless efficiency. But even as he fought, he could see their numbers weren't diminishing fast enough. With a shout, he ordered Marcus, Maya, and Jamal to retreat and loop back to the clearing. He was about to set off part 2 of their plan. Without a moment's hesitation, the trio abandoned the battlefield and sprinted in the opposite direction. They followed the path they had mapped out earlier, their breaths ragged and hearts pounding in their chests. They turned down a dirt road that led them back to the clearing, where the underground hatch was concealed beneath layers of foliage and branches. Just as they reached the hatch, Salvador's plan became devastatingly clear. A sound, louder than anything they had ever experienced, erupted in the distance. It was as if a colossal concert had just sprung into existence, the booming bass notes reverberating through the ground beneath their feet. The song, "Move Bitch" by Ludacris, blared from unseen speakers, the lyrics echoing through the night. The remaining zombies immediately turned towards the source of the noise, their attention diverted from the group. This gave Marcus, Maya, and Jamal the chance they needed. They quickly opened the hatch and slipped inside, sealing it shut behind them. Inside the bunker, they waited for Salvador to return. The minutes ticked by, transforming into what felt like a half hour of nerve-wracking anticipation. But Salvador didn't appear. With heavy hearts, they made their way deeper into the bunker, where they were met by the anxious eyes of Salvador's friends and neighbors, all of whom had helped build this sanctuary beneath the earth. As they prepared to deliver the grim news, a shaft of light suddenly pierced the gloom. It came from the companionway of the hatch, a beacon of hope in the tense silence. The bunker's occupants held their breath, waiting to see who would emerge from the darkness. When Salvador stepped into the dimly lit chamber, the collective gasp was almost deafening. Then, as if an invisible conductor had raised his baton, a wave of cheering swept through the gathered crowd. People were hugging, crying, laughing. The relief was magnificent to see. Marcus, being a natural-born leader with a profound sense of duty, felt a pang of regret. He had done all he could, yet he couldn't shake off the feeling that he could have done more. Maya was a different story. She had been terrified, but she had donned an invisible mask of confidence. Now, as she saw Salvador, her relief was as evident as her happiness. Jamal, however, stood out starkly. He didn't join the jubilant crowd, nor did he rush forward to greet Salvador. He felt oddly detached, an emptiness gnawing at him. And now, his attention was solely on the still open hatch of the companionway. As the crowd's attention was focused on Salvador, no one else seemed to notice that the hatch was still ajar. The euphoria was deafening, drowning out the faint sounds echoing down from the open passage. Jamal's eyes narrowed as he watched the hatch, his gut churning with a sense of dread. Something was coming. And it wasn't human,